friends, and welcome to another video. Today is a very highly requested video, and it has been for almost the entire time I've been kind of doing book content here on YouTube, and that is how I annotate, like my annotation process and everything that has to do with kind of that world. And I thought it was a really good time to film this because I am going to start annotating a new book today, and I want to take you along with my process and what that looks like. So the book that I'm going to be annotating throughout this next month or so is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. I am a huge fan of the TV show. I just finished season 2 and I am in full Good Omens mode. I am very, very hyperfixated on this world and this show right now, so I decided it was about time to pick up the book and just absolutely destroy it with annotations. But before I kind of get into the nitty-gritty of this, I want to talk about why I chose to annotate this, why I would choose to annotate a book in general, and kind of just why annotate. So the first thing about like reading in general is I do not annotate most of my books. It's not something that I choose to do very often, and I think a large part of that is because I went to school for English. I've annotated so many books in my life that sometimes I just want to enjoy a book, and that is totally okay. It is 100% fine to just read. You do not need to annotate. This is not like a necessary process. But if I do choose to annotate, it's usually for one of the following reasons. One, it is like a school work project, which obviously that doesn't happen to me anymore since I'm out of school, but for most of the books that I have annotated, it was because it was a school project. I was gonna write a very in-depth essay on the work or the book, and so I needed to really understand what was going on. Now I usually annotate because of reviews. I want to kind of know what I want to pull from the book, or it's usually to help me remember the book better. I feel like annotating always kind of seals the book in your memory. Quotes, themes, all of the like nitty-gritty of a book will be in your brain if you choose to annotate it. One, because I think you take time with the book, and two, you are writing out all of those things, which really, really helps your memory. So if I love a book or I love a world and I really want to remember it and like dig into it, I will usually choose to annotate the book. Other than that, if none of those reasons really fit, I will usually choose not to annotate. And sometimes I do feel like annotation can get in the way of enjoying a book or a novel. So I am pretty picky with what I choose to annotate, but either way, let's dig into what I actually do when I annotate, how I annotate, all of that stuff. First things first, before I start anything, I always choose my annotation materials. Now, you do not need a lot to annotate. In fact, for most of my college degree career, I annotated with just a pencil. That's all I used. I would dog-eat-ear pages and destroy the book that way. And I feel like it's a completely okay way to annotate. You do not need all the fancy equipment, fancy pens, tabs, all of that stuff to really have a good time annotating or to have like a successful annotating session. So by all means, you do not need the rest of these things, but right now it's what I use, and I will link all of the products, of course, down below in my description. So of course, I love to use lots and lots of colored pens. I have tons of them that I will use for a million different things, and I really like to kind of have fun with it and match the different colors to my books. For Good Omens, I'm using a red and black pen because of Crowley the Demon, which is one of the main characters in the book, and I'll get into, again, specifics a little bit later, but decided for those colors for Good Omens. I felt like it matched the cover very well, and again, it's really fun for me to do, but you don't need them. They are fun to have, and it's fun for me to do. The next thing, of course, is tabs, which is like every book lover's absolute favorite thing in the world. And again, I like to match the tabs to the book that I'm reading. I have a ton of like blue tabs right now. I need to get some different colors, but They're fun and they make it very easy to identify different themes and stuff in the book. But again, if you do not have tabs, I used to doggy ear my pages, which might hurt some people in the book community, but it works about the same with kind of highlighting different pages that you want to turn back to. I do think tabs kind of make things a little more specific, so just like looking at the edge of the book, you can tell exactly where everything is, and they are really useful for that reason, so yeah. I also, of course, love to use highlighters. So I have these really pretty like pastel colored highlighters that I've been really enjoying recently. My sister actually gave me these for Christmas last year and they have had some good use. I really enjoy them. I feel like they look very beautiful on the page. But again, you can just use a classic yellow highlighter to do your things, or again, a pencil like I did. I would just put a little box around what I highlight. And that's kind of all I use for annotating pretty regularly now. I don't do the like super fancy, beautiful layouts because I honestly do not have the patience, but they are gorgeous. So I will link some creators down below to get some inspiration from if you want to do those more like ornate annotation, like scrapbooky kind of looking pages. But again, that's not really what I do. I think the priority that I have when I annotate is to gain the most from the book. So that means analyzing, that means quotes, that means themes, all of that stuff. I really want to focus on that and not really like the beautification of the book. My goal is to destroy the book by the end of annotating it because I just want to gain all that I can from those pages. Alright, so the annotation process itself. What do I do? What is the steps that I take? The very, very first thing I do is to do some research on the authors themselves. Obviously, this kind of depends on the book, but especially if the authors are passed away or they're from like 100 years ago, I will always do research on like the historical context and the authors themselves because that can really, really change the meaning of a story. For example, with my copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, I did a lot of research on Oscar Wilde himself, and a lot of these older books will also have a really like intense note section, dates of authors' lives, things like that, just so you can really understand what the book is about, where it's coming from, because again, historical context really means a lot with some of these books, especially if they're set exactly in the time that they were written, because there's a lot addressing those periods, there's a lot of critique about what's currently happening in like political spheres, stuff like that. So I always want to do a little bit of research on the author and the history of the book itself. With Good Omens, I of course dove into Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett and why they decided to write this book together, and it was fascinating. So Neil Gaiman actually was inspired by the Just William books by Richard Crumpton, and all those books have names that follow the format of William the blank. So like, for example, William the Rebel. And Neil Gaiman was really inspired by this and thought it would be funny to do William the Antichrist, just because like, why not? That just seems like a fun time. And so he wrote the first 25 pages and sent it off to his friend Terry Pratchett, and Terry Pratchett read those pages and said, "Tell you what, either sell me the idea and that opening or we can write it together." Thus, this wonderful partnership was born. They had a really, really fun time writing it. From my research, they would send floppy disks back and forth between each other because it was that time. There was no other way of like transferring things to each other than these floppy disks. That they would send tens of thousands of words that they had written to each other so they could collaborate on this book. And they made, I think, one of my favorite stories of all time. And it's just wonderful. Really, really love the story of how this book became a thing. And if you look at Crowley and Aziraphale, which is the main two characters in this book, and you look at Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett side by side, you can kind of tell that there's a little bit of inspiration there from each other. It's just, it makes me so happy and it's so wonderful. After I do some research on the author, I will always go and kind of research themes that would make sense for the book, because you don't really know the themes going into a book, and it's important to do that research. For Good Omens specifically, I had already watched the show. I do know a lot about the story itself already, so I was able to kind of already lay out some themes that I want to look for, and the themes that I decided to look for with this book are love, humanity, good versus evil, religion, and free will versus destiny. I also always have a tab for favorite quotes because I want to make sure that I can reread those or kind of quickly go back to those for review purposes, because quotes are great to kind of just capture the writing in an instant, and so I always like to mark those as well. I know that with looking up themes, there's always a fear of spoilers or accidentally like revealing the plot of the book before you read it, and that is 100% a valid fear, and it most likely is going to happen. I, however, have kind of a different view of spoilers, and I think my motto is, if the book is ruined by a spoiler, it's not usually a book worth reading, which might be kind of a hot take or not a very popular opinion, but it's kind of how I view it. If a book can be good despite you knowing everything about it, it's a well-written book, and it's a well-written story, and it's engaging despite you knowing big plot points. And often when you're looking at themes, you're not going to reveal big plot points, and most of the websites will kind of try to conceal that for you anyways. But again, you are going to spoil some things when you look at the themes, but I feel like it's a worthy sacrifice if you are really wanting to annotate the book, so you can start looking for those themes very, very early on in the story. The other thing I would say is I always try to leave a little bit of room to add more themes that I notice throughout the story, because there are times where I've been reading and I'm looking for specific things, but then I notice, hey, wait, this theme is here and I haven't seen it before written anywhere, so I'm going to add that to my notes and kind of continue from there. So I like to start out with a little group that I can look for from the beginning, but you can always add more, and it's all about just being flexible and kind of going with the flow of the story. After I do all of that prep work, it's of course time to start reading. Now, just to give a quick little synopsis of Good Omens, it follows a demon named Crowley and an angel named Aziraphale, and they're both sent down to Earth at the very beginning of time, so you open with them at the Garden of Eden, kind of after the aftermath of Adam and Eve leaving. This book has been lovingly called Bible fan fiction, and it very much is, and I really love it for that reason, but it kind of follows basically Armageddon, the end of the world, and Aziraphale and Crowley are trying to prevent the end of the world from happening because they have fallen in love with humanity and with Earth and all that it has to offer. So that's kind of the, I guess, short synopsis of this book, and for that reason, I am also going to be kind of reading the Bible along with it, which is a little silly to me, but it's just so important for books like this that really draw from the Bible. I think of Paradise Lost, I think of Dante's Inferno, and the Divine Comedy in general. They draw a ton from the Bible, and so it's important to look at that and kind of research and figure out what they alter or what they're drawing from specifically, because it kind of defines what the book is about oftentimes. So for this book, I'm going to be following the King James Version of the Bible. I usually use that version of the Bible when it comes to annotating books, mainly because I'm the most familiar with it, but also I feel like it kind of has the most to offer when it comes to annotations. So I'm gonna kind of be jumping back and forth between the Bible and Good Omens, which again, is just kind of hilarious, but it's gonna be a fun time. I'm very excited for it. All right, now let's talk specifics about highlighting, underlining. What do you highlight? What do you underline? How do you not cover the entire page and feel like everything's important? All of that stuff specifically. So when it comes to what I do, I usually will only highlight quotes that I personally love or things that I find funny. It's kind of like a symbol to me of like, oh, this is my inner dialogue and this is kind of my emotional response to what's going on right now. I'll usually reserve underlining for analysis and for like more like nitty-gritty things. So again, specifically for Good Omens, I have all of my different colors because I'm kind of enjoying that right now. And of course, I reserved my highlighter for my favorite quotes or things that I just want to turn back to, things that I love. I have my black pen for analysis, like specific things with character development and also with like biblical annotations and kind of drawing on that specifically. So most of my underlining with this book will be with my black pen, which is usually the case. I also have my little red pen that I reserved specifically for Crowley and Aziraphale's love story, because this is in fact a love story. I didn't quite mention that before, but it very much is, and so I wanted to kind of mark that and symbolize that with my little red pen so it would like just stand out on the page, because I love them together and I want to really kind of dive into their relationship in the book. Also, changing up how you annotate throughout your reading is totally fine. I do that all of the time. For example, if I wanted to separate character development annotations and the biblical annotations, I would just add a different colored pen and kind of make a note of it for myself. I've changed how I'm annotating here, so this pen now equals this. As long as you kind of like let your future self know how your annotation has been changing throughout the book or novel that you're using, I feel like it's completely fine. I feel like the most important thing when it comes to annotating is being super flexible with yourself and just kind of going with the flow of how you feel like you would best grasp the novel or best understand the novel. And that also goes with underlining, highlighting. It really depends on how you feel most comfortable and how you feel like you want to annotate a certain book or story. Now, I've already annotated the first little chapter, which again starts off with their story in the Garden of Eden when they first meet each other. And I had to highlight the very first opening of this book because it's one of my favorite openings of all time. And that was, "It was a nice day. All the days have been nice. There had been rather more than 7 of them so far, and rain hadn't been invented yet, but clouds massing in the east of Eden suggested that the first thunderstorm was on its way, and it was going to be a big one." I just feel like that immediately captures your attention. You're like, what on earth is happening? What is going on? The biblical applications are already there, and it just like completely addresses what this book is going to be about in basically one sentence, which is incredible. And honestly, this first chapter perfectly sets up the themes of good and evil, of choosing humanity over heaven and hell, of kind of just how these characters operate, what their relationship is. It's all in literally 2.5 pages. Oh my goodness, the writing in this is so fantastic, and I feel like, again, the best books and novels will kind of just like lay that out for you. I, of course, already know a lot of this. I've seen the show, but reading this proves, at least to me, that spoilers don't matter. This was just so well written, and I'm just so excited to continue reading and diving in to all of the nitty-gritty. Now I'm gonna address some commonly asked questions that I get regarding my annotation process. And the first of those is, have I ever stopped annotating a book? And the answer is 100% yes. If I find that I'm annotating a book and it's taking away from my enjoyment of the book, or I am really like sluggishly going along, if I don't want to open the book because I don't want to annotate, I just drop it. It's not worth it to me to force myself to finish annotating a book if I'm just really not into it and I just want to enjoy the story. And that is perfectly okay. There's so many times where I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna annotate this later. That happened with The Picture of Dorian Gray as well. I was reading through and I got to a point where I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna annotate this another day. Right now, I just really want to enjoy the story, and that is completely okay. Again, annotation is fun until it isn't, and it's all about being flexible with yourself, with how you do it, as long as you're letting yourself know kind of the gist of what's going on, so future you, if you ever reread the book, can know exactly what's happening. That's all that matters. You know, just go with the flow. I think it's important not to get caught up in, oh, I need to have all of this right. The one thing I will say is if you're annotating a book specifically for an essay or for school, I wouldn't just drop it. Sometimes you do kind of have to push through the uncomfortability of annotating. And if it's, again, for school, that's just kind of a necessary evil most of the time. But again, I have definitely stopped annotating before, and I will definitely do it again. The next really commonly asked question that I get is, how do you annotate a book without destroying it? Now, I usually, when annotating, or if I'm choosing to annotate a book specifically, like Good Omens or like The Picture of Dorian Gray, I will destroy the book. I will buy a copy specifically so I can destroy it. But I have chosen to annotate books that I cannot do that with. Library books, friends' books, things like that. You can't really write in the book or dog ear it or all that stuff because it's not yours to begin with, and there's definitely ways to do that. How I usually choose to do it is use lots of tabs. You can easily take those out. I also usually have a separate notebook for my specific analysis, my quotes, my actual writing that I would usually do in the book itself, I would reserve for the notebook. So that way I'm not writing inside the book, I am kind of reserving that for a different material, and that way it doesn't destroy the book. I also have seen those clear tabs that you can put on books so you can like underline and highlight. I have never used those, but if you have and you enjoyed them, please let me know in the comments, because I've been interested in them. I just haven't quite jumped into that ship yet because, again, usually I just destroy my books. All right, so that is the general idea of how I usually choose to go about annotating a book. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you gained something from this. If you have a different way of annotating or you have different thoughts and ideas, please let me know down in the comments. I really enjoy chatting with you guys down there. And my Good Omens review will be coming as soon as I finish the book, which will probably take a little bit, but I think it's worth taking your time when annotating. So if you want to see that full review, I will have that posted on my Instagram eventually, so you can go ahead and follow me on there. I try to post reviews of most of the books that I read there. And if you've enjoyed this video and you've watched to the end, thank you so much. I make lots of bookish content, travel content, Chicago content, all of those things. So if you want to see more, please hit subscribe. I'm trying to hit 4,000 subscribers by the end of this year. It would really mean the world to me if you became part of our little crew. But yeah, either way, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!